December 7th Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee. Just as a reminder, due to COVID-19 and recommendations by Waterloo Regional Public Health to exercise physical distancing, City Hall is closed to the public. Members of the public are invited to participate in this meeting electronically by accessing the meeting live stream video at kitchener.ca/watch now. While in-person delegation requests are not feasible at this time, members of the public are invited to submit written comments or participate electronically in the meeting by contacting Sarah Goldrup, Committee Administrator at sarah.goldrup, GOLDRUP@kitchener.ca. Delegates must register by 5 p.m. on December 7th, which we already passed that, in order to participate electronically. Written comments will be circulated prior to the meeting and will form part of the public record. There are no consent items, so we will proceed to the public hearing matter under the Planning Act as advertised, start time for 7 p.m. And again, this is a formal public meeting to consider applications under the Planning Act. If a person or public body that would otherwise have an ability to appeal a decision of the City of Kitchener to the local planning appeals tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kitchener before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal that decision. So we have tonight two items before us. Item number one is for zoning bylaw amendment application and modifications to the draft plan, approval of subdivision 30T-11205, and this is for 250 Woolwich Street, Fallowfield Crescent on around Bridgeport North, and with the Principia Development Limited. We have staff first presenting. Mr. Baton, I believe you will be presenting first, and then there's a delegation as well. Whenever you're ready.
Through the chair, Mr. Bateman, you're still muted.
My apologies. Sometimes I have trouble with technology. Can everyone hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my apologies.
No worries.
Mr. Chair, and good evening, committee members. It is my pleasure to bring forward a report to you for committee's consideration regarding a zoning bylaw amendment application and modification to draft plan of subdivision 30T-11205. The owner is Principia Development Limited. Next slide, please. Just a little site location. This property is located in Bridgeport North, just off of Woolwich Street, Falcon Ridge Drive, and Field Sparrow Crescent. It's just south of if you're familiar with the River Ridge subdivision by Activa. Next slide, please. So the area in red represents the lands under application this evening. It is a small parcel of land. It's only 0.43 hectares in size. And the purpose of adding this particular piece of land to the balance of the subdivision lands for the Principia subdivision is so that a developer can complete the Field Sparrow Crescent, the southwesterly leg of that road. Presently, he does not have that. In order to do that, there's two things he needs to do. So he needs to have a zone change from currently those lands are zoned agricultural 1, and he's seeking for residential permissions. And also the second component is to, again, add those lands into the existing subdivision approval and modify conditions of approval that take into account this additional land that's being added. Next slide, please. So it is my opinion that the proposed zoning is consistent with the balance of lands within stage 2. The proposed zoning is appropriate and compatible for the subject lands and surrounding neighborhood. Key component of this is that it will allow the developer to bring in additional lands that in the plan that will facilitate the completion of Field Sparrow Crescent in the community at large. And that, again, in my opinion, this zoning bylaw amendment demonstrates good planning principles and is consistent with the official plan designation on the subject lands. Just to let committee members know, I did not receive any written communication from members of the public regarding this application. I had a few inquiries, email inquiries regarding what was taking place. And I had one today from a resident located on an old cottage place regarding the trees that are located on these lands and how they were going to be addressed. Thank you. I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you. We'll hold off on the questions. There is a delegation on behalf of the applicant. I believe it's Kristen Bairstale with GSP Group. Kristen, you're welcome to speak whenever you're ready. Kristen, can you hear us? Kristen, you're up. Okay, so she may be away from her camera and she can't hear us at the moment.
I have just promoted her and she will be rejoining the meeting shortly. I think she might just be having.
Oh, I see. Okay, excellent. Perfect.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay, Kristen. You're welcome to make your delegations, and once more, you have 5 minutes to make a presentation.
Good evening, Chair Singh and members of committee. My name is Kristen Bairstale from GSP Group. We are the planning agents acting on behalf of Principia Development. We were the planning agents for Mr. Seston on the balance of his site, immediately adjacent to this property. We don't really have much to add at this point. We've gone back and forth with Brian over the past few months to kind of finalize the staff report. We have had a chance to review the staff report as well as the modified conditions of draft approval, and we don't have any concerns or objections at this point. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, that is excellent. And thank you for keeping it short and sweet. There don't seem to be any questions of you. Yep, no questions. Oh, and yes, there is one actually. Mayor Babenovic.
Not a question. I was just prepared to move it.
Okay, excellent. So the item has been moved. There are no questions for you, Kristen. And any questions of staff? Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Bateman, you mentioned something about Old Carriage Road and one resident asking you about the treatment of the cottage. Can you elaborate on the answer?
Well, actually, sorry, through the chair, it's actually not trees on Old Cottage Place. It's with the subject lands itself. There's a row of conifers that are located. It's on the property boundary separating the Activa lands to the right immediately to the north and the subdividers lands to the south. And she was just inquiring as to how they were going to be addressed. She'd obviously prefer to have them retained, to which I advised her that the city's tree management policy is in place for these lands. The developer is required to submit a detailed vegetation plan that will really outline measures that will inform the servicing of the lands to see what impact it will have on those trees. It'll recommend trees for retention and trees for removal. And that's sort of normal course of action for these types of scenarios.
Right. Okay. So at this point in the process, we don't know the treatment of the tree, but we do have a tree management plan in place. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. Next up is Councillor Michaud.
So I think I was asking the same thing. This is Appendix B 217 with regards to the butternut trees. Is that what you were referring to, Councillor Marsh, or am I off here? And sorry if I am.
I can answer that question.
Okay, please.
So through the chair, yeah, the butternut, that was an issue that was flagged with the original subdivision approval back in 2014, Councillor. That matter has been dealt with, and it was dealt with the stage 1 of that subdivision approval, and it's been cleared, and there's any further issues with that butternut.
Can I just ask, are the butternut trees still there?
I believe so. Kristen,
Okay.
can you maybe ask her, maybe she's a little more up to date with that? I know our environmental planner was more involved with that, to be honest with you, Councillor.
Sorry, I wasn't there in 2014.
Yeah, I know, that's true.
Through you, Chair Singh, yes, the butternut is still there. There was some pruning and work that needed to be done to the tree in order to maintain it. But yes, it's still on the site. And as far as I understand, it's still in relatively good condition at this point.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Mayor Vivanovic, do you have a question or your hand's up from before? Your hand's up. Councillor Marsh, is your hand up from before or you have another question? Okay, so those seem to be all the questions of staff. It's been moved by Mayor Vivanovic, so I'll call the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? And that item is carried. Thank you, Mr. Barrisdale.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
And next up is item number 2, which is the official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment application for 1255-1291 Fisher Hallman Road for Max Becker Enterprise 2 Limited. There's a presentation of staff and then we have delegations afterwards. Julianne, you'll be presenting first. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mayor Vrbanovic, and members of the committee. As you are aware, I'm Julianne. I'm in the planning department, senior planner with the city, and I'm here this evening to speak to you about the applications for official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and associated changes to an already approved draft plan of subdivision in the form of a modification. The draft plan was approved in 2015 by the Ontario Municipal Board. Since that time, changes to the housing market and a new vision for these lands has resulted in refinements to the originally approved draft plan and has necessitated corresponding changes to the land use designations in the Rosenberg secondary plan, as well as the zoning bylaw. In addition, the conditions of a draft approval are also going to be modified in order to reflect these changes. I'm here this evening to highlight these changes for you. Next slide, please. Thank you. The subject lands are located within the Rosenberg community. The lands are comprised of approximately 59.82 hectares and are located south of Bleems Road, west of Fisher Hallman Road, and north of the Williamsburg Cemetery. The lands were originally intended as an adult lifestyle community and was approved in 2015 with large land blocks with only a few intersecting and mostly private streets within proposed smaller plans of condominiums. Next slide, please. This aerial photo shows the existing context of the subject lands, which have previously been farmed and are transected by a hydro corridor. Now these lands will be developed with a plan of subdivision with a range of housing options at densities that are transit supportive. Next slide, please. As mentioned, the initial vision for the development of these lands was for an adult lifestyle community where people could age in place. Since that original approval in 2015, the vision for these lands have evolved into a more traditional subdivision that would be home to persons of all ages. The proposal introduces 9 new municipal streets, which in turn has created new parcels of land within the plan of subdivision. These streets provide better connectivity within and external to the plan and improves walkability throughout. The plan has also redistributed parkland throughout the plan to create a strong linear park and trail system without the loss of any parkland. As the lands have been further divided through the introduction of new streets, the associated land use designation and zoning requires adjusting in order to align with the new lot fabric. Changes to the official plan designations as well as the corresponding zones had to be made in order to implement the redesignated plan of subdivision, and these are the subject of this report and the planning instruments before committee this evening. Next slide, please. The land use designation and zoning changed to align with the newer lot fabric and the redistribution of the densities. Adjustments to draft plan conditions of approval, for example, are technical changes and conditions around staging, preservation of the heritage house, and servicing matters. Next slide, please. This slide shows the various land use changes, but I'm not going to go through them individually. There are numerous changes. The higher density area continue to be focused along the Fisher-Hallman corridor, which serves as a mixed-use corridor and central spine to the Rosenberg community. Those are the areas outlined in the bright red or in the purple. This meets the vision as set out in the Rosenberg secondary plan as approved by the Ontario Municipal Board in 2015. The densities are intended to support transit usage in order to achieve a 24% modal split in favor of transit usage. The center of the plan will provide for built form and densities that support a Main Street pedestrian-friendly atmosphere with community focal points such as a new library, shops and parkettes that are connected via a trail corridor, and that will also connect adjacent lands to the west, which will have a community center and school as their focal points. So this is the area that is in the lighter purple. The new library will be located in the light green, right, it transects those lands. And then further to the west, there is a small blue parcel that will be the new school site and community center. The plan will provide for a range of housing options, including high rise along the corridor, mid-rise apartments and stacked towns, as well as townhouse and single detached dwellings. In the northern half of the plan, the Hennifer Farmhouse, a local cultural heritage resource, will be adaptively reused and conserved. The highlighted land use changes are also supported by corresponding zoning bylaw changes, together with implementing regulations. Next slide, please. The planning highlights of this plan: the plan achieves densities of greater than 55 persons and jobs per hectare and supports transit usage. The higher densities are focused along the Fisher-Hallman corridor. The site has linear parks and are more urban in nature. A new KPL library facility will be a focal point for the Rosenberg community and will be constructed within the first phase of this development. Next slide, please. The trunk sewer is being extended to service this community. The plan will offer a variety of housing options for all age groups. The heritage resource on the site, known as the Hennifer House, will be conserved and adaptively reused with associated special policies and zoning. Next slide, please. It is my opinion that the proposed official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and the modifications to the draft plan represent good planning. The development of these lands is consistent with the Kitchener Growth Management Plan. It meets the provincial policy statements, the growth plan, as well as the regional and long-term city policy direction. This concludes my presentation, and I welcome any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Julianne. And yes, your presentation was thorough. Please, members of council, if you can hold on to your questions. We'll get to delegations first and then come back to staff for questions once the item has been moved. For delegations, next up we have Vaughn Bender. on whenever you're ready. I think it just takes a bit for delegations to be switched over. Welcome, Vaughn. As you know, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Singh, Mayor Verbanovic, and members of council. I will speak quickly in an effort to save some time for my colleagues as well. In addition to what Julianne has shared regarding the history of this subdivision, I just want to emphasize that it is a master planned community that Schlegel has been designing going back to 2009. I wanted to remind the committee members that in fact the City of Kitchener Council did approve our application back in 2014 unanimously. We were subsequently appealed to the OMB by adjacent landowners, and I think that's important information and something that we'll touch on a little bit more in response to a letter that I believe has been circulated tonight as well. We have transitioned, as Julianne mentioned, from a 100% proposed adult lifestyle community to a more mixed general market community with pockets of adult lifestyle living embedded within that. So we are still pursuing adult lifestyle pieces within the community, but in the context of an intergenerational neighborhood. Just if I may speak to the letter that I believe you have been circulated within the last couple of hours by MHBC. So we do have minutes of settlement from the hearing in 2015, and we do have a private developers agreement that is in place as well. And although we are not necessarily in disagreement with any or all of the points that have been made in the letter, the reality is we've only had a few minutes here to contemplate what Mr. Britton has put forward tonight. And so at the end of the presentation here, I think Chris Pidgeon can speak to it a little bit more. But I think what we're looking for and would ask of committee is to perhaps give us the week between this committee meeting and council's meeting next week to have the opportunity to dialogue with our neighbor and with city staff and take a look carefully at what has been proposed here, these additional words, because we certainly are committed to fulfilling what was agreed to in the LPAT or OMB decision back in 2015. And we certainly are as well striving to implement our private developers agreement. We did provide all of our detailed engineering drawings to STAM and to the neighboring development owners. I believe it was last week in a design notice, uploaded everything to an FTP site and so on. So we are looking to work collaboratively, cooperatively with our neighbors. And I think if we had the week to work out some details, we could perhaps address what's been asked for tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Alex Vandersloot, who's really done a great job in working through the details of this modification with City of Kitchener staff and with our consultant team. Alex.
Well, thank you, Vaughn. Yes, we're finishing up. Alex, you also have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a heart attack when my screen went blank. I didn't know that was going to happen. Okay, we can click through the first few slides here that Vaughn already went through. There's a slide with draft plans on it. Okay. Yes, that one there. Thank you very much. Just get my notes out here. So on your screen on the left-hand side is the approved draft plan from 2014. It was modified at the OMB in 2015. It consisted of large blocks of lands that would have been developed through a condominium structure. On the right-hand side of the screen is the modified plan that we're discussing today. The community structure remains largely the same. There's been, as Julianne mentioned, the introduction of public streets where private roads would have existed under the previous model. and greater density and land areas for mixed use have been directed to Fisher-Hallman Road in support of the mixed use corridor. Next slide, please. Slide, please. Yep, we'll skip that one. Okay, nope. Yes, stay there. Thank you. Sorry. So this is a rendering of Rosenberg Way. We're looking west. The intersection with Fisher-Hallman Road would be to your left off screen. We see Rosenberg Way as a pedestrian streetscape that's enclosed by mixed-use, well-designed buildings with lots of articulation and activity on the street. On this image at the top right of your screen is where the Kitchener Public Library branch is planned for, Julianne had mentioned. And it's located at the intersection of Abram Clemens Street and Rosenberg Way. Slide, please. This is another rendering from our planning justification report. We're now looking east on Rosenberg Way. Fisher-Hallman is off to the top left there in the distance. The design for this roundabout was done prior to discussions that we had with Barry Cronkite and his team in transportation planning at the city. They brought a great idea to us, which was to implement a Dutch roundabout at this location. A Dutch roundabout includes a dedicated lane around the outside of the circle for pedestrians, but also a separated lane for cyclists, which allows for cyclists and pedestrians to be prioritized ahead of vehicles. And it's tied in directly to our trail corridors that Julianne had mentioned on the Union Gas easement on the west side of Abram Clemens Street, and within the Hydro Corridor, which is a designated city spine trail corridor in the city's new cycling and trails master plan. Slide, please. This is an image of what a Dutch roundabout looks like. Our will be a little bit different, a little bit more urban than this, but as you can see, there's the dedicated pedestrian path with the white striping, and you can see the cycle track in an alternate tone of asphalt. Slide, please. This is a set of graphics from our HIA addendum. It's a shadow study to inform zoning and height restrictions within proximity to the Williamsburg Schoolhouse, which is located near the intersection of Bleems and Fisher-Hallman on the south side of Bleems Road. And the purpose of the shadow study was to demonstrate not the design of a building, but potential heights for a building that would not have a shadow impact on the heritage resource. So we will be, we were at Heritage Kitchener Committee in September with our HIA addendum, but we will be back there in the future to address a site-specific HIA, which would address the implications of a fully resolved development concept for the high-density block. This set of images was taken at the summer solstice, which is the longest day of the year. And if we go to the next slide, this set of graphics here is taken at the winter solstice, which is December 21st, which is the shortest day of the year. The objective with our shadow study was to demonstrate that the height and the locations of buildings of different heights would not impact the heritage resource for greater than a 2-hour window within any given day. Slide, please. I think actually now we can click through to the end. Oh, no, we'll stay here, sorry. This is an example of the type of built form that we envision for Fisher-Hallman Road within the mixed use areas. The Rosenberg secondary plan contemplates built form of 3 to 5 stories generally, so low and mid-rise, medium density development. We intend to frame the Fisher-Hallman Road corridor with a consistent street edge at a height that is pedestrian favorable, I'll say. There's a 4-meter multi-use trail running down Fisher-Hallman, and it's intended to be a highly active pedestrian corridor, and we plan to provide buildings that will further encourage people to use that street. Slide, please. I'll discuss a little bit about the parks and open space strategy that we used to guide our development. The plan is really built around 2 trail corridors, one running north-south and one generally running east-west within the Hydro Corridor. And actually, we'll click through to the next slide, which shows a graphic, and I can talk over these points. As you can see, the orange and red buildings on the right-hand side of the plan there show that consistent street edge up against Pfister Holman Road. You can see the plan is quite green. There's a lot of land dedicated to parks and open space land uses within this plan. And we have obviously the Williamsburg Woods at the south end of our plan. The parks were redistributed, as Julianne had mentioned, based on the updated property fabric after we had introduced public streets. But as Julianne had said, again, it's important to keep in mind that the land area being dedicated to parks is not being reduced at all. Another important point is that all homes within the new community will be within less than a 2-minute walk to one of the trail corridors. And then we'll have direct access off street to all of the park amenities that are going to be within this community, which is really great. And I think now we can skip through to the end for any questions. I had included some slides in anticipation of potential topics of discussion, and oftentimes it's helpful to have a graphic on screen when we're going through that. So anyways, that's it for the Schlegel portion of the presentation. Thank you very much. And I believe Chris is going to speak a little bit and then we'll have questions. So thank you very much, committee.
Yes, thank you. Chris is up next. Chris, you also have 5 minutes. And yes, Alex, afterwards, members of the committee can ask questions.
Yes, thank you, Chair Singh, members of the committee. Very briefly, so Vaughn mentioned in his opening comments that we received the MHBC letter. Julianne had a very busy day, as I understand it, and we didn't actually receive that until a few minutes before the committee meeting. So it's not unusual, I would say, for committee to either defer or allow us the opportunity to provide in writing back to council by next week's meeting a response, and hopefully to reach a consensus on the 2 conditions that have been identified by Paul Britton for review. We'd like a few days to work through that and then bring it back to council next week. I would like to say that it's a very good staff report, and certainly appreciate Julianne putting this together. Certainly council can or committee can appreciate simply by looking at map number 1 and map number 2 in the staff report, where we have up to 41 areas identified for changes to the zoning. And while they're not substantive changes to the zoning, in fact, I would say to you that the Hannover House, for example, the zoning regulations that have been put in place really do strengthen the preservation of that heritage resource, which was always the intent through the original approval process. But I think through the heritage impact assessment, working with Heritage Kitchener, we've been able to accommodate that. So we would request either a deferral of the decision to allow us to refine the conditions, or that we will provide in writing a response to council, hopefully a consensus on the 2 conditions that have been identified for council's deliberations next week. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chris. And as all 3 of you are pretty well aware, typically each person speaks first and has an opportunity to be asked questions of from committee members. But because it appears that you guys all presented one after another and want to present together, just keep your mics on. And if there are questions from the committee with the respective person who can answer it best, just speak up. Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, just having received the letter ourselves a couple minutes before, I don't really appreciate getting that just before a meeting, as I'm sure you don't either. Do we really need to, is there anything in there that can hamper this plan or end up at the LPAT because we decide to proceed forward without any more dialogue with the letter, the author of the letter?
Is that a question directed at staff, Councillor Galloway?
I guess it could be. I'm just wondering, I understand that there's some will to defer it, but I just have, I guess, concerns with deferring this when I think it's a good plan. So I guess maybe Julianne, if you wanted to answer that, that would be fine, or I can wait until it's time to ask staff questions.
No, Councilor Galloway Seelock, there doesn't seem to be any other questions. So you're the only one in the queue. So if that's your primary concern at the moment, Julianne, perhaps if you can, give us some more insight on it.
Well, we, as you know, through Mr. Chair, staff also got it very late in the afternoon. I was trying to contact others, but it was through the supper hour, and unfortunately, we didn't have a chance to connect either with the applicant or with other staff members. We would like an opportunity to discuss it, as Mr. Bender indicated and as Mr. Pigeon indicated, but perhaps if a deferral isn't necessary, then we would be prepared to come back to you next week and hopefully have committee, or in this case, council, make a decision on the applications before them. I'm sure that it's something that staff will help facilitate any discussions with the applicant and the others that have authored the letter.
Just one other question right now. I might have follow up. When was this report made public?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in response to Councilor Galloway Seelock's question, it would have been made public last Friday, I believe. That's when it gets posted. So, perhaps Sarah Goldrup could confirm that, but I think that's when everything gets posted.
That's okay. I don't need further clarification on that. I know that it was a while ago. I just have concerns with receiving a letter at 6:45 before a 7 o'clock meeting. I'm not blaming staff whatsoever for that. So don't think that I'm trying to blame you. I understand the position you were put in as well. I would like to proceed forward with the recommendation from staff, with the understanding that there's going to be some dialogue between the applicant and the person who wrote the letter. So that would be the direction that I would like to take, and I'd be prepared to move that, Chair Singh, at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Councilor Galloway Seelock, and perhaps the concerned person can be notified that even if this does pass through the committee, that of course it still would need to be ratified in council, and there's still some time in between that both staff can dialogue or they can connect with the applicant as well pertaining to their concern. So hopefully they will be contacted after this meeting and notified accordingly. Mayor Vivanovic.
No worries, and I'm supportive of where Councillor Galloway is going with this. I too share a little bit in the frustration, but in fact, because this is an OPA and a zoning bylaw amendment, in fact, it would have been advertised a couple weeks ago, like even prior to the, and so the report would have been available to anyone who wanted it even prior to last Friday's formal agenda, correct? Miss
that is correct.
Yeah, Miss Van Westerhold.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to respond to Mayor Verbanovic's question, that is correct. The notice would have gone out a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, the item has been moved by Councillor Galloway Seelock. I don't see anyone else in the queue. So, Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, I think that it would be great if we could get, once staff have had a chance to review the letter more in detail and the applicant has a response, I would like to ask for that to be circulated to council by email, not on Monday next week because we have meetings all day, but let's say by Friday, end of day. I mean, as much as it's true that it's annoying to all of us that we didn't get a chance to absorb this information, we didn't read the whole letter because we had meetings back to back. It's the fact that they had until now to submit that letter. So Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there.
No, that's a good point, and similar to, as I had made, that they be notified and be told that again, even though it passed committee, it's not fully approved yet, and there's still time for them to dialogue with staff and as well as the applicant with to have their concerns recognized and see if any compromises can be made. With that, I will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And the item is carried and proceeds to council. And that is
Thank
it.
you, committee.
Thank you. Thank you for all the delegations.
Thank you all very much.
Keeping it short. Appreciate it. Stay safe. And if I can get a mover to convene the meeting, Councillor Ioannidis. All those in favor? Opposed?